Well, at least we can start up a little bit here. I know, Ryan, I'm really excited about talking to you today. Um, and it's this is actually kind of a fun topic. We're talking about, the cloud, we're talking about Teams, we're talking security, which is what I love. So why don't we start with you? Why don't you introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks, Chip. Much appreciated. First of all, everybody, thank you for joining this Thrive Tech Talk, where Chip and I will be diving into some external sharing with Teams. My name is Ryan Thomas, and I am sort of a former software developer turned SharePoint architect, I would say, back in the early days, and started a company about 10 years ago to sort of completely focus on SharePoint and Microsoft Cloud collaboration tools. And then that company joined the Thrive family last year, and we are sort of pushing the ball forward with Teams collaboration, with a good blend of Chip security knowledge and mix, and sort of excited to sort of dive into it today, and hopefully we can help some people out.
Awesome. And I'm Chip Gibbons. I'm the CISO here at Thrive. I've been with Thrive for a long time. It feels like at this point in time, I've been through a lot of iterations of it. I'm not as good as Ryan in the cloud software collaboration area, which is one of the reasons I'm really excited about talking to him. But Thrive being a SOC 2 Type 2 compliant organization, I do know a lot about compliance, a lot about security, and I'm hoping today's discussion we can kind of meld those two areas and talk about some of the fears people have about going online, fears people have about the cloud, and kind of talk through some of those areas.
Great, thanks, Chip. Which is a good segue into, so what are we doing here? Make sure you guys are in the right webinar. We're not going to hammer you with PowerPoint today. We're going to have a conversation, so that's why it's a tech talk. And if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to circle back, and please, send some ideas in the chat. Even send an email after if there's other things that you want to hear us talk about. If you're shy and don't want to sort of raise your hand or call us directly, but you want to hear about future tech talks, please, we do this for the customer, for the user base, to help everybody, use these tools better. So, so please, don't be shy if you can help it. And what I think, as coming from the collaboration side, Chip comes from the security side. We get a ton of requests. I would say that the reason why we're doing this tech talk is the single biggest request we seem to be getting or have been getting over the past year. And, a lot of it's pandemic driven, but even before that is, hey, we want to set up external sharing with Teams. And technically they can do it, but I think most people are kind of smart enough to realize that just opening the floodgates is not the right approach. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how we can alleviate some of those fears, how we can address some of the security concerns, how to help you think about your planning efforts. And if we can get through that, how do you share with people outside your organization using Teams and SharePoint as a backend, and give you maybe remediate some of those fears and maybe give you a little bit of a path forward. I think we'd call that a victory, right, Chip?
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of times I talk to two different types of people. One person's gone to Teams and they're sharing with everybody, and I say, hey, I just got the permissions. And then they get this like deer in the headlights look, and I'm like, oh, we got to talk. Or I've talked to somebody, I'm like, hey, what are your cloud thoughts? And they're nervous, don't want to get there. They don't want to jump into that pool yet. And I'm hoping this talk we can talk to those two different types of people, and we can get them so they're in the right spot in the middle. Yeah,
and let's kind of start with the why, right? And we won't harp on this too much because I think most people are here because they know they have an interest in it. But what's driving this? And it's sort of, I'm curious from your, let's call it more of a security angle versus my more of like a, getting collaboration work done kind of angle. But, there's this need in the marketplace to sort of move away from the classic email structure. And what I am curious is maybe, just you throw in your 2 cents when the time is right to, why email isn't such a great security component either relative to Teams. Teams to me is a tool that can be secured. You can have monitoring and auditing and access rules and see it versus, you firing off documents over email and, good luck to what happens to those. And obviously there are some ways to protect against that too, but very, very, very few people I've seen are doing it. But I think people are looking for more efficiency, right? They have vendors, they have customers, they have consultants, they have projects with external folks of various types. And And I think a lot of people are starting to figure out that, firing outdated, antiquated documents back and forth over email and then trying to piece the changes back together is extremely difficult. And I think from someone who's been heavily diving into Teams for years now, whenever I have to go back and send stuff back and forth with email, it's like torture. So it's, there's a real need for it in the marketplace. And, just sort of curious to get your take on that too, from your side.
Yeah, absolutely. And Thrive uses Teams very heavily internally. We're not as externally facing with it, but we're expanding upon that, especially with Timlin now part of our group. And it's interesting because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's seen this. When you started an email thread and that forks into 10 different ones, and you're trying to search it later on, and in some of the emails talking about something that has nothing to do with the original email string, right? And it goes in different directions. And this is where Teams and collaboration really shine. You can start doing things with it, and you can create groups, you can create more security, because if you send an email I send an email to you, it's very hard for me to block you from sending that email off to somebody else, right? Well, there's technical solutions to that. It does make it more difficult, and most people aren't going that road. But with Teams, you can have a lot of built-in security that is already there. So when you're collaborating with people, you know who you're collaborating with, and you can do it in real time, which is, unlike email, you send in, you send it off, it might come back to you, it might not. It's almost like you're shooting something out in the dark.
Yeah. I mean, emails, it's a terrible place to store data, try to recall data, and try to collaborate on data. To me, it's a sort of an asynchronous point in time communication. And it's fine to just send a message to somebody, but when you're working on a document or you need to update a document and get sort of those updates in front of anybody, external users, it really starts to fall apart. And I think the thing that we don't want to miss is that a lot of the reasons we're getting these requests aren't just because the customers themselves want to do this. It's they're feeling the pressure from the outside world to keep up. Their vendors, their customers are asking for this type of sort of access to data, collaborative, up to date kind of efforts that, it's not just sort of for your internal people and to do better for your customers. It's in order to keep up with your competition, you're going to have to start providing this type of access and services to your customers and your vendors, right? You make it easier to work with you. And I think that's a big driver as well.
I agree. And I think which goes to a point that, a lot of our clients make, that they might be SEC compliant, or they're HIPAA compliant, or CMMC, or whatever compliance that we're talking about here. We talk to them about these different technologies, and what they come back to me with is, where can we be secure? How can we make sure we do this without, our data being out on the internet that is accessible to everybody, right? That's the biggest fear that people see, and where they're trying to make sure they feel secure, right? And this is where, we look to you, Ryan, and say, hey, how would I take, if I have, GDPR information that I need to secure, but I need to collaborate with another team on, how would we make that secure, and how would we do it? Because I know that a lot of tools out there that we can do this with. Teams is one of them. And I was hoping we could talk a little bit about the groupings within the teams and how we can start, locking things down differently than we could in other situations.
Yeah, and we can jump into some of those let's say more specifics. I don't want to get too technically deep. I'm not as technical as I used to be. I know what the capabilities are. It's tough to remember all the screens, if you know what I mean. But that goes to that kind of like what's holding people back question, right? And you answered half of it, and so I'm always curious to get the sort of security side and then the kind of usability side, and a lot of it just comes down to lack of knowledge about how the tools work, and so hopefully we can throw a little bit of, or shed a little bit of light onto that today. Obviously there's fear, right? There's fear. A lot of people say, I don't want to open the floodgates. I'm safer right now. No matter, you know what I mean? No matter what, I feel safer. And if I don't do that, at least I haven't opened up a new potential risk. But I think the risk versus the reward balance is shifting, in the sense that I think it's, there's a safe way to do it. And I think we, need to start cracking open, how we help people sort of chip away at that. Right.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that and prior to, and even talking about online storage and where we're keeping data and where the data is, one of the things that a lot of clients need to do is understand and classify that data, right? So if we're talking HIPAA compliant data, that's a different classification than maybe the standard Word doc that you have somewhere else. So we want to make sure that clients understand the data they're sharing and they classify it ahead of time, because while you can put anything online, you might not want to put everything online, right? You want to make sure you understand that, because when you do get audited, if you are under any type of compliance needs, it's extremely important to understand where, they're going to ask you where this data is, and how it's accessible and what the permissions are for this data. And within any collaboration platform, Teams included, you can set permissions for all this stuff. You can see and show what is out there. And it's extremely important for all our clients to understand what that data is and what they're collaborating with.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of your information architecture, structure, and then the policies that go with it. And I think, I want to ask you about policies shortly, so don't let me forget about that. But the the kind of IA approach, I think a lot of people, it's there's still a lot of security through obscurity kind of going on out there, and I think some people are probably a little nervous that once you punch up the search button and you search for something that you never know what you're going to find. And I think now adding an extra layer of, hey, let me allow external access to other people that aren't even in my company, that there's some fear there. And I think that does come back to what you said, which is, the data classification, labeling. And, one of the things that we would highly recommend as part of the process is a governance plan. And governance is, to us, it's half about security, and the other half is about guidance. And part of governance is architecture and understanding what type of data that you will allow as kind of a rule, right? This is the type of data that we're going to allow to be shared externally. And you have to think about that in advance and define those policies. And I do want to ask you about policies. So in my experience, one of the things we would talk about, how do you start breaking through the ice is to start to develop these policies, right? I mean, that's kind of hopefully right up your alley. It's not mine, but these types of things scare me. And one of the reasons why they scare me is because when we've tried to enable these at many customers before, we'd say, okay, well, show us your information security policy, like the stuff that we would expect would help us be the guide to how to set up the tools. And a lot of companies don't have any of those. I just want to see, like, how many people you run across that really don't have any security policies, or they're so weak that they wouldn't sort of withstand any type of like traditional audit or anything like that. And what do you do to help those people? Because it is kind of an initial first step, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The policies and procedures, you can't really secure anything before knowing what you're supposed to be securing and how to secure it, right? So we do come across a lot of clients, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience right now are going, oh gosh, they don't have this, right? You need it. And one of the things it's not that it needs to be perfect the first time. You just need to have something on paper to start with. So once you start getting, moving forward with it, and you review it every, on an annual basis, and you update it and you fix it, that will at least get you in the right direction. Right now, if you're saying, okay, if you have no written information security policy, your employees don't really know what they can and cannot share, right? Should they be on social media talking about stuff or not? Should they be, able to plug a USB drive in and take the data home? Maybe. That depends on your security policy. But if you have nothing there, then people like Thrive, who are trying to help you, don't know what to lock down and what to not lock down. So it's extremely important to have that kind of data and that kind of policy in place. It protects you, it protects your employees, and it helps you make a better solution for your cloud collaboration software. It just gets you in the right place. So, for us, that's a big area. And honestly, we do walk into a lot of clients, and even clients who are very mature, they have a lot of trouble keeping up on it. That's why we have more clients who are looking at hiring, for example, a vCISO offering, because they're trying to get somebody in there to review these policies and keep them up to date and make sure they're going in the right direction. That in the past, it really wasn't, I would say 10 years ago, people really weren't focused on security policies. Now with so much data out there and so much data moving around, you almost have to.
Well, I mean, security's, I mean, we saw it with GDPR and as kind of the collaborator types, we saw it sort of inching its way to the, the US,
Yeah.
and we've been trying to get in front of it. And I don't, like I said, I've never claimed to be a security expert. I always needed someone like you to kind of help define those policies and understand. I never felt comfortable making recommendations. I just didn't. I said, we'll work with you, but you need to tell us what's acceptable. And we'll make guidance and recommendations, but that two-pronged approach is really important. And I do want to point out, and I'm a throw myself out there guy. We have a couple of questions in the chat are like, hey, well, you're talking about this. Why don't you guys do it? Right? Like, why doesn't, and so I'm going to answer that honestly and say, because that's one of the reasons why I'm here. It's one of the reasons why Timlin as an organization was acquired by Thrive, because Thrive sees the value in this. They see the value in information sharing, communication. So to those of you out there that have asked that question, please reach out to me and know that I am actively working internally in this organization to make this all happen. And I do believe in forward thinking, collaboration, communication, and more importantly, as a software developer back in the old days, I'm all about eating your own dog food. That's what we call it, which is, you got to live and breathe this stuff. And the more I can get our internal organization to live and breathe this stuff, you may notice we're on Zoom right now instead of Teams. And there's a good reason for that. Teams is still not a great webinar platform, but I would, if it were probably entirely up to me, I would just deal with the sort of lack of extra stuff and just go for it, because it's how I do things. I like to learn on the fly. So I do appreciate the questions, and go ahead and hit me with the hard stuff. I get it, and we're working on it. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this webinar. Chip and I, we want to make this all happen, but we got to do it securely. We have to make sure that our customers' information is secure and safe, right? And we got to do everything the right way, which is what we're talking about here.
That's one of the areas, and it's very interesting because obviously we were using Teams, and we're a big Microsoft shop, and we've been that way for years. We were very excited when Timlin came on board because we want to expand our overall footprint within the collaboration market. We use it very heavily internally. We are careful, as I recommend for all clients, when we start walking down that path. Thrive has, I want to say, 75 different written policies that we try to follow for our SOC 2 compliance. And that's, we want to make sure that when we go online and we start sharing documents with our clients, that this is all part of the security plan. We use a lot of different platforms out there, as you might imagine. We're a ServiceNow shop, so we have a lot of data out there too. And we're trying to make all that, merge all that together and make it a cohesive platform for everybody.
Yeah, and we still have some more things, sort of some bullet points to go through, just to make. We don't want to get the information out. We still have plenty of time, but we did have a question, and I don't know if this is the questions are supposed to be coming through or not. Don't really care. I love answering questions, and so I appreciate everybody out there asking them. That's why we're doing this. And before I ask you the question, Chips, this is really for you. I will say, anybody that is asking about external sharing with Thrive as an existing customer, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. One of the first things I'm going to ask you is, what kind of stuff are you looking to do? What is it that you need? Because there's a ServiceNow portal, there's Teams, there's lots of different ways to do this. And we want to provide you the right kind of active, ongoing, collaborative information that you need. And I'm a collaborator, so that's why I want to talk to you and understand what it is you're looking for. So Chip, this question is, do you have, when you're doing policy reviews for, we have a CISO practice, right? You come in and help people virtually sort of provide those security services, because not everybody needs a full-time CISO. When you're helping people build these policies, do you have like a checklist of things that you're going to ask them? Like, do you have kind of like a plan? Like, how do you kind of, real high level, how do you approach like?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot depends on how mature their security practice is to start with. So if they have nothing, we need to first determine what they have. So we need to understand, what data are we trying to protect? What are we concerned about? Are we under any type of compliance needs? Some clients think they're not, but then suddenly they have an employee in Germany, and now we're talking different things, right? So we need to understand what they have before we go anywhere. But once we figure that out, then we start saying, okay, let's get some some basic policies out there, and we're gonna start doing a checklist, and I say step by step going through the policies. So we're going to do a written information security policy just to understand that they have that. Do we have an employee handbook so that employees even know what they're supposed to be doing? Like, there's a lot of different areas within that. Acceptable use policy is a big one for us too, because the employees, obviously it's the name says it all, but what's acceptable? What can we do within the organization? Because you want to keep the organization safe as well as your employees safe. And then as we go through, we take a look at that over your overall security posture. And again, each engagement is slightly different because people are and organizations are in different levels and they're trying to do different things. So some organizations are very much saying, okay, I feel pretty good on my internal security, but I need an overview of how we're doing, externally, and I need to get ready for, let's say, an audit. But then you have some clients who are saying, okay, I'm at zero. I haven't done anything. I have a firewall. Where am I going? And then we need to reevaluate and basically do almost understand the network and how everything's flowing before we can move forward.
Okay. So there is a process there. So the person who asks that question, there's a checklist. Once you kind of understand, like, are you a restaurant that only deals with US people, or are you a multinational healthcare that has, PII and patient information and HIPAA compliance and GDPR rules? And I mean, that you got to sort of figure out what the boundaries are, right? And then start working your way in. And that's Chip's domain and not mine. All right. So I have some sort of some bullet points I want to make sure we hit, because I don't want to forget anything. And so the next section here is kind of, and we've already started doing this, but how we kind of breaking the ice on the things that people are worried about or afraid of. And so I'm just going to start rattling some things off and give you a chance, Chip, to sort of throw your 2 cents in. But, for me, I'm a visual learner. So it's as much about like education about what are the risks. So I think a lot of people know what the risks are. But I think, people just aren't out there turning the switch on because the risks outweigh the rewards for doing something like that. But I think a lot of people don't know what the platform's capabilities are to protect them. And simply going through the settings and looking at them will give you an idea, but it won't give you the whole picture. But I would say the first thing that we always do, right, is the fear of the unknown, is we start to educate ourselves on what the platform can offer you, so that you start to get an idea of what you can lock down and what you should lock down. And that to me is for us, let's call it education, right? I just want to get any response you have to that before we keep going.
Yeah. So, and as somebody who, when we brought Teams into Thrive a number of years ago, education is an important one, that everybody is on the same level when they get into the platforms. They all understand what they can do, but then the education really can't just stop, right? Because then you have the power users going in one direction, and they're doing all these crazy things that, and maybe you don't want them doing. But then, there's the people who are getting left behind, who are saying, okay, they're still on the basic, and they haven't moved forward, and because they haven't been educated on what else this tool can do. So once you get into the tool, to me, it's extremely important to continue that education, to continue that training. It doesn't have to be multi-hours sitting in a classroom training, just little snippets that get people on to the next level. Because and as you, Ryan, probably know more than anybody, the platform keeps on changing, right? They keep on adding new things to it. And a lot of those things are great and they're really helpful, but if nobody knows about it, you guys aren't really taking advantage of what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. One of the reasons why I have a job is because it keeps changing. I mean, that's some of the customers just ask us to help them keep up with it and identify the change, manage the change, and from a security and a sharing perspective, that is a risk, right? I mean, when things change in the platform, and they present holes that you need to fill, and you need to identify them quickly, and then figure out what you're going to do with them, because the platform is just improving. Well, the capabilities keep being added. I definitely would say improving. That's a judgment call, but it's obviously getting a lot better. But it is presenting more challenges along the way. It gets more complicated. More. It's really hard to make something really, let's say, rich and complex, really easy to use. And which is why we're here to help people. And I think that the education we talked about will alleviate the fears. I do strongly believe that the platform if set up properly with the proper policies, can be secured to the point where it would pass a stress test of a security audit, so to speak. And I think a lot of people are sharing externally that have sensitive data, and they're doing it effectively. But it does come with that education piece.
And
Yeah.
yeah, one thing, Ryan, I want to point out too, which is actually one thing I really liked when I first heard about Timlin, when you guys came on board. You're not and Thrive has never been this way either. We don't put something in and leave it and walk away. It's extremely important to, once you get, whatever tool is, and we're talking collaboration now, that we keep on, we monitor, maintain it, and adjust it as things change. So for us, that's extremely important. And Timlin, Ryan, you can go into this in more detail on how things, as you work with clients, how you move forward with them and help them keep them secure going, and not just secure, but in many cases up to date on what's happening within that tool.
Yeah, there's kind of three things. If I can remember them, my mind doesn't work as well as it used to in a lot of ways. So one is kind of maintenance, the other one is training, and the other one is governance. And I'm just going to say them out loud so I don't forget them. And let's sort of tackle them one at a time. So governance is what you do first, right? And I'll keep it high level, but essentially governance is making sure you have the policies that you talked about to enough of a degree that you can apply them to technology, right? If the policies are so weak, as you mentioned, that you don't really know how to configure technology to support them because they're just not clear enough. Well, that's certainly a guide that, hey, I got to clean up my policies, right? And then you sort of figure out how you set up the technology to meet those policies, right? Everybody's policies will be different, but there will be a lot of overlap in terms of how people set up the tools. And then the other part of governance is really the guidance piece. It's how do we want people to use these tools? How do we want people to share externally? And that's going to come down to naming conventions. It's going to come down to really kind of specific site access to the places that would be shared externally. Sometimes visual cues or indicators to determine that this is an externally shared site. You can go so far as to add Azure information protection to document libraries to ensure that anything that leaves the system still has to have it authenticated later on for a Microsoft document or a PDF. Like you can go to that level of extreme if you're really scared about documents kind of leaving your environment. And then there's the training piece sort of comes after that, right? Once you know how you want people to use it, then you build those training materials. And then you're guiding people about here's how we want you to use these tools. What do they always say? You're more of an expert than I am at this. It's really tough to stop like malicious intent, right? What you're really trying to stop is the accidental data leakage, like somebody making a mistake. And you do that with, putting as many technical barriers as you can, reasonably as you can, right? That doesn't prevent them from doing everything. But then you supplement that with guidance, right? Training, like, and keep doing it over and over again, especially as the platform changes and your policies change and your governance rules change. You need to keep your people up to speed, right?
I think you brought up a good point there. There's a whole section out there called Shadow IT, which is where people are they're trying to do their jobs and they want to do their jobs well, and they need to get data to somebody. And so they're opening up a personal Dropbox account and they're transferring data that way. And the last thing you want is data leaving your organization and you have no idea where or why, right? And by setting up policies and procedures in place, training people on how to do it and making it easy enough they can do it, you go a long way to eliminate that shadow IT and data accidentally leaving the organization. Again, it's not malicious intent. It's just somebody who's just trying to do their job, trying to get through that next section, trying to, get the sale or whatever they're trying to do. And it's hard to fault them for that, but you want to make sure that you give them the right tools that they can do their job effectively, but they don't put the organization itself at risk.
Yeah, I mean, one of our selling points, in the Timlin days was, we can help you prevent shadow IT because we can set the needs up in a way that they're supported. And because generally what I find is the end users, if they need to get something done, they'll figure out a way to do it. And a lot of times when they do it on their own, we call it shadow IT, but they're kind of working around systems. So give them a viable solution to do what they need, but make it supported and secure. And, it's you're better off that way than you are, letting them try to figure it out on their own, or trying to tell them not to, and then having the few slip through the cracks. So I totally agree. I totally agree. And the last piece that I sort of got that I didn't mention was maintenance. A lot of people don't know that you can go through as a Teams administrator and look at any team really quickly, all of them, and see how many have guest access, right? And then you can go look and individually and say, hey, this team still has guest access. Is that still viable? You have a lot of control over access to those accounts, or you can even license some of those accounts. You have things that you can manage quickly and easily. You can also go to a SharePoint site, which is really all the stuff that you'd probably be worried about sharing from Teams, right? Because mostly it's back-ended by documents. I don't know if people are securing chats as much, but you can go to the SharePoint site and you can look really quickly and run a report even that says like, okay, show me all the shared links here. Because if let's say it's not necessarily a Teams front end with an external user, but it's a SharePoint site shared with a guest access user account or an anonymous account, like you can go look at that pretty quickly, and then you can sort of start automating those tasks. There's third-party tools you can write PowerShell to sort of run those reports for you and spit out the like, okay, here are all the changes, or sorry, here are all the shared the teams with shared sites, guest access, all the SharePoint sites with shared links. Here are the deltas. I can fire those reports off to site owners or team owners and say, I need you to verify this is still accurate and valid. Like a lot of people don't even know that you can do this stuff to help maintain sort of that ongoing security. Because what a lot of people are scared about, Chip, is that I open this up and then people start sharing links. And the next thing you know, I have hundreds or thousands of links shared with these accounts, or with all that people have as a link. And I don't know, it's only going to grow over time. People don't go back and clean it up, which is absolutely true. And I'm super scared that one of these days, one of these documents is going to be the wrong one and someone's going to get their hands on it. And there are ways to report on that and mitigate that on an ongoing basis. But like anything else, it's like going to the gym. Like, I got to go there and put a little bit of time in every now and then to sort of stay in shape.
Right. And again, that goes back to the training, because people can share documents via email and they know not to share it, or they know what to share via email. We just have to train them what to share via Teams. And one of the things that actually you brought up, and a good way, I think a lot of our clients to kind of dip their toe into this, is I'm sure they have a vendor or another organization they collaborate with already. For example, they might have a outsourced marketing person, or they might have an outsourced marketing company that sales works with. They might, that might be a very good collaboration area. So you're not having emails go back and forth, but you have one location where they can collaborate on data, and you don't have 100 different sheets of stuff that you're trying to update. You have 5, but and they're not forked, and they're not iterations of version 1 through 100. You can have one. In my mind, that would be an easy way to start into it. You create a very limited scope, but it gets some people stepping into that. And Ryan, I'm assuming it's during some of the sales processes, that's kind of a lot of the areas that you see.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I'm with you. Oh, we do have a question from the audience. This is a loaded question. That's okay. They all are. Different licenses provide different functionality with classification. What is the minimum licensing needed to effectively implement? I'm assuming this wouldn't be for you, Chip.
Nope.
So I will take this one as best as possible. And I hate doing this to people, but it is the truth. It's the it depends answer. But I'll at least try to give you what it depends on. So, if you need e-discovery, if you need Azure information protection, and the only way to determine whether you need that stuff is to sort of dig in and say, okay, well, what are my policies? What do I want to share? But how much risk mitigation am I required, or do I need to employ? If you got the formula to Coca-Cola, you probably don't want it anywhere near leaving your system. But if you did, you'd want it, wrapped in a, let's say a document with Azure information protection, which is the most secure that I know of to get a single sort of piece of content, no matter where it goes, secure. And so it's hard to answer that question specifically, because that is sort of a separate licensing component, that piece on of itself, Azure IP. And then, a different e-license will provide e-discovery in case you ever need to have a certain set of data sort of locked down for auditing, or, sort of post legal discovery work and things like that. So I think the answer is it does depend. It's not that complicated, though. I'm not trying to make it complicated, but I think it does warrant even a short conversation. Well, what are you trying to do? If you're just trying to share externally with guest access into a couple of like key teams, and you're going to carve that stuff out separately, and you're not going to allow anything except, sort of specific data into that area, it's probably, an E3 license, but I mean, we have to talk about it. Could be even a business pro license. And the licensing is changing all the time, so I don't keep track of it all, but not a difficult problem to overcome if we have a quick conversation. Okay. What else? We got about 10 minutes left. Keep the questions coming. Happy to throw them in there.
Yeah, one of the questions here is it's does Thrive have the capability to to understand the types of security settings that are important and not important, and honestly, that's right up Ryan's alley, and that whole the whole team. That is what they do day in and day out. They understand what the security settings are. They're not they're not just putting something out there, like we said in the beginning, and walking away. This is very much this review your environment. And I think as Ryan has been talking here, and what's made me so impressed the entire time is he talks about the policies, procedures, and governance, and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to protect, so they can design and create the collaboration platform to fit what you're trying to do. And that's, again, this is not a one size fits all type of an engagement, and never will be, because if it was that way, then it would not be as secure as you want it to be. This is very much it fits your organization, because your organization is doing something in a certain way. Just like everybody's Active Directory is different, everybody's online collaboration tool is going to be slightly different, because we want to protect it. And that's where it's, to me, it's extremely important. And one of the things that, I know we spoke about before, and I want to bring it up again, is just that classification of data. Once you understand it, and where what's important to your organization, as Ryan mentioned, if you're Coca-Cola and you want to protect that asset, and you want to protect the data that it has there, you want to make sure that it's that's wrapped in a locked bubble wrap, right? So for us, it's we need to find out what that is for you, and so we can protect it.
Yep. I'll answer that, and then we got a couple questions coming in. I will do my best to try to help us navigate through, Chip. Like I just want to respond to that though. It's the settings. You go through the settings. You look at the settings. It's not rocket science. Some people might think it's rocket science. It's not rocket science, but it's you don't just set them willy-nilly, right? That's why the piece that you offer comes in, and it's so important. And we're better together than we are separately, so to speak, because to me, it's like it's almost like how we do Teams governance. We ask a bunch of questions, and I worked hard when we did Teams governance, sort of templating to turn the questions into like normal human being questions, not just technology drivers, but more like, let's talk about why and how you would do this, as a way to then decide what the switch on the screen should be, if it's a left or if it's on or an off, so to speak, right? And because a lot of times you say, do you want this on or off? Well, let's talk about like, why would I have it on or off? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what should I white label, certain domains, or should I allow them all in? Well, let's talk about why you would allow any random domain to be a guest access account versus like just ones that you want to allow in, right? I mean, it's tough. Like, you have to have a conversation, and it's kind of based on your policy. Your policy may say, we will agree to share with external accounts, but only ones that with companies or vendors or whatever that have been vetted. Some of them even like require that they go through training, right? Like, their vendor has to have training in order to access their team, so they know what not to do with their data. In which case, if those things happen, then you can say, yes, we will allow this specific domain after it's been requested. Right? There are ways to do it very sort of methodically. It's not just flipping switches based on, some sort of, this sounds secure, this sounds secure. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Like, and so that's why I'm not trying to make it more complicated than it is, because I'm a keep it simple kind of guy. But I mean, just take the time to kind of go through that stuff and ask the right questions, answer them, set the technical directive, document it, even take some screenshots, and then revisit, right? It's a maintenance item. When things change, or every quarter, go back and say, hey, has anything new been released in the tenant that's going to cause us some problems? And then you go back, and when you look at what you've documented, you can kind of compare it against that and say, does it impact that? right? Is this new setting that just showed up in Teams, does that impact anything we've decided already? You know what I'm saying?
Right. And I think that actually what you bring up right in the beginning, which I thought was very good, is we're better together than separate. With, you know, we have enough engineering at Thrive. We have enough security analysts. We have enough, you know, we have people here who know every aspect of IT. And so if you ask us a question, you might ask one person, they go, you know what, I don't know that answer, but I can get it for you, and I can find out, and I can find out what the right answer is for you. So one of the reasons a lot of people go with Thrive is because we can answer those questions. I was actually on the phone last night trying to solve a Azure question. I'm like, I cannot figure this out, but I know somebody at Thrive who does, and they're able to fix it, and we're able to move on. There's always somebody within our organization now, especially as we've grown into the collaboration platform, we can answer almost any question. So if you have something you're doing over here technically, and you're trying to solve a security problem, we can bring in security people and take a look at it.
Yep. And we have some questions here about, one looks like, I think it's two-factor. I don't know. I'm not the security guy. So I can tell you that I can answer half this question, I think, which is you can license and pay for multi-factor authentication for guest accounts. It does cost you a little bit of money for those accounts. And just, guest accounts are generally free. And I think it's a 5-to-1 ratio of guests to paid users in terms of how many guests you can have. I know that it's changed over the years, but then this is, there's governance compliance with NIST 800-171 level 3, which that goes way above my knowledge grade. I don't know if you.
That's somebody who's probably. I'm assuming they're going for they're either a DoD vendor or they're looking for CMMC compliance. We'd have to take a look at what you're trying to do with Teams in that situation. We can absolutely do it. And one thing I wanted to bring up actually is what I love about Office 365, Microsoft in general, and Teams with it is when you're authenticating against it, if you're using a SIM or you're using another platform to pull that data, there's a rich amount of data that comes out of Teams, which allows you to take this type of information, and you can say, okay, where are people logging in from? If your end users, as many people are now, they're working from home and they're connecting in from different places. You can now audit where people are connecting from. So if you see somebody connecting from Germany, but you have nobody working in Germany, maybe that's a red flag for you. Could be somebody traveling, and that's fine. But what Thrive historically does for a lot of our clients, if we're doing security services for them, we're going to take a look and see where these people are connecting from, and we're going to start alerting off of that. So we can start locking down. So if somebody does, I don't know, steal somebody's credentials, get in some other way, we can see and we can lock it down very quickly.
Yep, good. And again, if you have specific questions like that, folks in the audience, reach out to us. We're happy to have a call with you. We're not the sales guys that are going to put the full court press on you. We're happy to have a conversation. One is another question overall about how strong is the encryption. Overall, I mean, some people are worried about Microsoft hacking attempts. Yeah, people are trying to hack it all the time. I had my account locked out last week because someone hammered it and blocked it out. And I have multi-factor, so there's that kind of concept. But then there's I think this question relates to the transmission of the data. And I do know, and I'm not an expert on the specifics, but I do know that all data moving back and forth between Microsoft's data centers and end-to-end devices is all encrypted during transition between devices. Sort of I guess the concept, anytime it sort of hits the wire, it is encrypted with sort of industry standard encryption. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
But one thing that that if people are concerned about going to a collaboration tool, encryption is not I'm not saying it's not important. It's very important. And Thrive does, Microsoft does do high level encryption on everything in transit. One of the things that if you're thinking about doing this, comparing it to, let's say, a SharePoint on-site service or something like that, we're talking a totally different world in that there's no way, there is a way, but it's very unlikely you as an individual or you as a small organization, well, I wouldn't say small, you could be a very large organization, but with a small IT staff and SharePoint that are going to be able to secure this as well as Microsoft can in their cloud. It is just not the same. I think with the Hafnium attack, 2 weeks ago, kind of taught us on-site Exchange servers, you can lock them down, but it's very hard to protect everything. It's in some cases better to keep things in the cloud because they're the ones who get the information first. They're updating it first because in the cloud platform. You're more secure generally in the cloud as long as you take a lot of the steps that we've been talking about to lock things down, make sure guest accounts just aren't willy-nilly enabled. If you do those steps, you're much more secure.
Yep. We have a SimSoc question. Do you know what the sort of back-end software? I don't know anything about that stuff, so maybe what's that? The software component that someone mentioned Sentinel here. Is that something you can speak to?
So there's a lot of different types of, if you're using Sentinel, which is more of an antivirus product, Sentinel-1, but if you Thrive uses, we have a FortiSIM backend that we use. It's a multi-tenant SIM product that we use to manage and monitor a lot of our clients. You could have something on site. You could have a Splunk. You could have a Sumo. There are a lot of different types of SIM platforms. Office 365 is a very rich API. Most SIMs, if not all of them, will connect into it and we'll be able to pull data. Now, Thrive, what we do is we write custom rules specifically to monitor Office 365 because there's a lot of stuff in there, and depending on our clients, we might adjust and change some of those rules to make sure that those clients are protected because they're worried about certain data access, they're worried about certain documents, whatnot. We work with our clients on that. But if you're using any type of SimSoc platform, yes, or you can use the Microsoft one if you're fully in Azure. But that's kind of a different discussion if you're going that road.
Yep. Okay, good. Thanks. And then a question sort of more up my alley is how to manage those alerts and in terms of, how do you set up like a best practice or alerts for teams? I'm assuming that's a response to my comment about, knowing who has guest access to Teams, looking at any deltas in that, looking at what shared documents are out there, because really it's, that's the SharePoint component. It's kind of lives separately from Teams. And maybe even sort of security permissions in general. So Microsoft has, let me try to answer that. One is Microsoft does have a robust auditing capability and sort of DLP rule violator message center, which I'm assuming the person who asked that is familiar with that. If not, so it will alert you to DLP rules, and those are regular expression based. So you can put some pretty crazy stuff in there. You can also go look at audit history. However, the shortcoming, and I think Microsoft intentionally does this to allow for third parties, is they don't kind of automate the whole process. Like you don't set it up and say, okay, I want this to this audit report to run every day, and I want it to isolate these specific sites or the specific data classifications, and I want it to spit out any deltas or changes or whatever. Like if it doesn't violate a DLP rule, you kind of have to do it yourself. So of course, third parties have come along and allow you to do more than one site at a time, to aggregate the data. And then you can get even more robust. And this is where we do a little bit of, like, let's call it the custom solution, because everybody wants it a little bit different. But essentially we aggregate that data into a location and use the built-in tools like Power Automate to identify case. Let's call it a case, right? Something like, oh, this changed, or this raised a red flag. It's a rule that got violated, right? And it means somebody has to look at it, and it kind of sends out like a task notification. And so there's lots of ways to do that. I don't know of any like really good third-party products that kind of do everything. Like all kind of like the security audit thing. I think that's probably, maybe we're looking at an idea here if somebody wanted to build that. But something like ShareGate Apricot has some of the capabilities. You can then sort of aggregate the stuff together on your own. Like I mentioned, you can build some scripts. Like it's the kind of stuff that we've done. And you can piece that together into an entire kind of like auditing management solution for maintaining your external sharing, right? If you don't want to do it all manually.
And one person they talked about Sentinel, and I didn't see the question at first. They were actually asking about Azure Sentinel, which is their SIM platform, which we absolutely can get the data in from, from pretty much anything that's going on within Azure. The only part I caution is it is though very robust platform. It's very much Azure focused, but it also is fairly complex. So it's not something that I want just a single person who's doing other things. Also, it'd be difficult to have one person just run with that. So it does make it a little bit harder. Somebody does ask about Microsoft Zero Trust. That's a whole nother conversation we probably could have at some point, but I think that's a little beyond this one specifically.
Okay. All right, so we're running out of time. I know we didn't really have a set time, but I know we wanted to keep it to an hour. And with 9 minutes left, there are sort of these like key top items. We've mostly covered them, but I think it's good to maybe just hammer them out there so people just kind of can mentally picture like what the whole approach looks like. And sort of curious if you want to add anything, Chip, if you want to sort of dig into it at all. But they really are kind of I believe in the whole concept of the workshop. We do a lot of workshops with our customers. We're like more of a traditional sort of consulting, sort of business process improvement kind of group. So we believe in sort of talking to the end users, demonstrating some capabilities, getting some sort of on the fly feedback, showing some things in real time. So if you are in an organization where you're still trying to figure out how this tool or these tools can help you with external sharing, and your business users they're not using it extensively internally yet, I love the idea of workshops. And it's really just interactive, showing people what these tools can do, and really kind of coming out of it with some requirements, some knowledge and understanding, and maybe also some gaps too that you can fill.
Yeah, and one thing I actually want to bring up with that one is it's really important with any type of software that you bring on at an organization to roll it out and not just send it out. Because if you roll it out to clients, you give them the end users, you give them the tools and how to use it. They will use it to its full extent, and they will really, it will make the improvement that you're looking for. But if you just throw it on out there, we turn this thing on, let's see how it goes. While they sometimes work, it's not always the result that you're looking for.
Yep. I totally agree. Second is your security policies. I think, we talked about this already, but again, I'm sort of recapping is if you don't have any, start thinking about them. It's going to become, if it's not already, more important if you're doing business in the United States. We're seeing it so much more in terms of customers, vendors asking for, sort of your security, your policy, your compliance, like to make sure that they're not vulnerable or you're not presenting any vulnerabilities with their data. You and your customers probably going to have some similar things coming along. So you probably need to do this anyway, and it's going to be really hard to implement any type of external sharing or team security, even internally, frankly, if you don't have, if you haven't thought through that piece. And that's where, Chip, you come in, in terms of helping people along with that.
Yep. No, I agree. That's the thing I hammer home with our clients anytime I can talk with them. Policies. If we don't have any, we need to write some. And we need to get them, otherwise we're not knowing what we're securing.
Yep, exactly. All right, and then start to understand, and this is where you probably need to, a little bit of help, is understand how people can work around the security, right? Accidentally, even intentionally. That's where you got to put your head on a little bit and talk to some people about. We can set up the best system, but if it's got a little hole here or there, we at least need to know where our risks are.
Yes. And that is, a lot of times when I talk to clients, I talk about risk, and risk is understanding your risk and accepting. There's some risk it's okay to accept. You're not going to make everything zero. That's not possible. But you have to know what your risks are. You have to mitigate the higher risk and maybe accept the lower risk if that's within the company purview. So, if you're looking at something, and right now, data going outside your organization, going out through that shadow IT group, going out through, the Dropboxes or the Box.coms of the world, that is unsecured or unmanaged by you, that is where, you know, the risk might be fairly high, and you want to mitigate that risk by coming in with a solution that everybody can use that is easy enough to be able to do it.
Yep. Yep. We do have a good question. I will get to that before we wrap. I'm definitely curious to hear your comment on that, Chip, but I'd like to get through this sort of menu list first here. All right. So plan for maintenance. I'm a digital transformation person. That's my mantra. And I try to tell people it's not a project, it's a process. It's transformation because it continues, right? Your business changes, the technology changes, your employees change, culture. I mean, a lot of things changing on an ongoing basis, and it happens a lot faster. You don't get necessarily the 4-year development cycle where you get used to it for 4 years, and then the hassle of patching and upgrading and all that kind of like stuff. It's morphing all the time. So build that into your process right up front. So, you need to revisit whatever you do, and it's not going to take a lot of work ongoing, but you do the work up front, and then you build into your plan how to revisit it at regular intervals. It's just like the person who asked the question about how do I sort of maintain my sort of auditing and security. It's the same thing with the settings, right? And the changing of the tools and the changing of your employees and the changing of the laws and the risks that, all of a sudden we get new risks. Seems like every week with something showing up out in the wilderness. So we have to go, oh no, we have to go mitigate that, right? Like pay attention to that stuff and build it into your plan.
Yep.
Okay. Governance, and that same thing, iterations on governance. Governance isn't a set it and forget it. It's a living, breathing thing. Once every quarter, 6 months, have a meeting and look at the feedback you're getting, look at some things that are working and some things that are not working. Look at what you need to tighten up a little bit and maybe some things that you could loosen up a little bit. I use that time to apply the changes in the technology that needs to your whole process, right? I assume the same thing goes for policies too. You want people revisiting those on a regular basis?
You should be revisiting your everything at least annually, right?
Okay.
You want to look at it because as we were looking at our work from home policy the other day, and we're going, well, this needs to be updated, right? Because a year ago most people were in the office, so there's things that change constantly. Your disaster recovery plan obviously now is probably very different than it was a year ago, because most people that I talked to did not have a pandemic response within it. So it is just as we talk through different policies and procedures, there's things that we constantly do adjust.
Yep. And the last is just plan for ongoing training and support. Training isn't a one and done, and support. I'm a firm believer that you have opportunities to help your business users. In this case, help them properly share externally. You want to be there. You want to have your support person understand your governance policies, exactly what's allowed, what's not allowed, and be able to explain it when that person needs it. And that will be your biggest driver against preventing shadow IT and possibly accidental data leakage.
Yep. And there was one person within here that they're asking, do you recommend a hybrid model to keep PII information more secure? And I thought that was a really interesting question.
That's the one I wanted to get to.
Yeah. I thought that was it is. Yes, but with a caveat, obviously, because PII is very important. So let's say you do a background check on every employee that you come in with. Right now, do you just email that back and forth? Because if you're doing that, your risk is really high. So if you're doing that, then maybe when by setting it up with this more hybrid collaboration model, you can have just share within Teams. You can share the documents back and forth, encrypted. Only the two companies have access to it. You can lock it down to specific IPs. You can really lock it down, but you can make it more secure than you're currently doing now. So depending on what you're trying to do, I wouldn't just put it up there for the sake of putting it out there. But if you're trying to solve a specific need, and you're looking at your current risk and you're going, okay, this is pretty high, putting it in there is a definite consideration.
So how do you read what a hybrid model? Because I read it as like, I have my on-premise systems and that's where I would store my PII. I don't know. I'm not, how do you read that question?
I read it like I have a file server that I keep everything on, and then I'm using this as the sharing platform is the way I read it. Because that's where most organizations, if they're keeping data, they're keeping PII here. But if they want to share it, how are they sharing it now? Because if they probably are. So how are they doing that? That's the way I read it. And I go, okay, if they're doing that now, what's the risk they have now? Now, it might be a very secure way of transfer now, and maybe it's not the right way to go. Maybe it does not solve a problem, but if it does solve a problem and it's more secure, it's a definite thing to consider.
Yeah, and here's the good news about PII is when you compare it to, let's call it on-premise systems, that at least Office 365 has sort of automatic DLP rules for PII. Like they're already built in. Like they are trying to find first name, last name, addresses, things like that, like social security numbers. There's regular expressions for that, credit cards. So they're looking for that stuff already, whereas on-premise system may not. So if you try to email PII, if your DLP rules are even just turned on, right, like the kind of the default ones, it'll warn you, and you can have it stop it. You can go high end and do Azure Information Protection. If you must give PII to an external party, I would consider putting Azure Information Protection on that document library so that the document remains encrypted and requires an active authentication, current active authentication, no matter where and when. Give it an expiration date if you want to. For people that don't want to spend a little bit of money on that, I mean, I tell you what I do personally, and I'm a little ashamed of this, but I kind of do the lowbrow version, which is I will password protect a Word document if I have to put my social security number and send it to like a bank or something, and then I'll call them and say I'll give you the password, which is basically the same thing as Azure IP, just doing it for you automatically. But the bottom line is I would add an extra layer of security, and I still think that makes it far more secure than whatever probably a traditional on-premise solution, because it won't give you those features.
Correct, and you're going to be sharing very well with an on-premise solution versus if you do need to share, which is the whole reason we're having this conversation. Then there are a few options that you can go with. You might go with a dedicated sharing one, but in this case, you do have a lot more collaboration that you can do within the documents.
Yeah, I think that it's funny how people bring that up, and I know we got to wrap, but that they make that like a sticking point, which I understand. But I think the reason why it's the fear factor, because people do this all the time, right? You're a bank or you're a lawyer or you're refinancing your mortgage, and they send you to this like, whatever those guys use, some Citrix share file or some like secure stuff, and you upload your stuff there. I think it's that whole thing where when you see like regular documents sitting there too, you get nervous that like, well, wait a minute, if regular documents are there, why should super secure documents be there too? It's almost like a mental hurdle. It doesn't make Teams any less secure if you're setting it up properly. Yeah, I wouldn't intermingle my PII in with the same team that has a whole bunch of other junk in it that other people have access to. You lock it straight down. You maybe have a very specific location that just has certain sharing rights to it, and nobody else can get to it. And then it's kind of the same thing as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. All right, awesome. Well, I know we went over time, but I really appreciated the questions. Actually, that was a nice welcome. I wasn't sure what we were going to get. And anybody, you'll love it. Thank you. If you have more questions, follow up. If you want further conversations, give us some ideas. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Chip. That was awesome. Really appreciate your perspective.
Ryan. I had a fun time.
Yeah, this was good. Love doing it. And we'll see everybody soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.